So you're listening to the INTERZONE show. No, well, I can't even get the show name right.
I know, it always takes three goes to get the first sentence.
It always takes three.
I've recorded enough bloody lectures in my time to know this.
You're listening to INTERZONE Pod. You're listening to INTERZONE Pod. My name is Gareth Jelley, and today I'm talking to Nick Lowe. Hi, Nick. Thank you very much for coming on.
Hi, Gareth. Thanks so much for doing this.
What we're going to do today is you're going to basically tell people about some of the films you weren't able to squeeze into your massive 30-film Mutant Popcorn in INTERZONE 294, right?
That's right, yeah. So these are three films that I desperately wanted to get out there, but which had very limited theatrical releases in the UK, and for three completely different sets of reasons, were films that just needed an enormous number of words to explain to INTERZONE readers and to explain what was so exciting about them. And so they just hit the cutting room floor. But one of the great things about having the pod is that we can dump endless amounts of words into this and mop up some of these really interesting films that would just not have made it into print, despite all the wonderful space he managed to find for whatever it was, 5,500 words of drivelling from me.
It was, yeah, and you can order that issue. I should plug it right here. You can order a subscription from interzone.press. Which is where you'll find all the links you need. And there is an ebook edition available from Scarlet Ferret, and the ebook edition has an extra story by Daniel Bennett called Benji the Killbot. So yeah, check those out if you haven't already. Moving on to the first film then. So you're going to start with Moon Man, I think.
Yes, well, this is a classic example of a film that you would have actually to take an entire column to explain. But this was the biggest Chinese hit of 2022. It's one of this emerging high confidence, big budget strand of Chinese cinema, playing mostly to the domestic audience, but took, I think, over 400 million, that's in dollars.
Something like that. The 10th highest grossing film of
That's right, yeah. So absolutely massive, and had very limited exposure in the West. In London, where I'm based, it played on one screen, which is the local Chinatown cinema, and it was always packed out because they have tiny screens there. But it's a really important film for understanding where Chinese cinema, Chinese science fiction cinema is at the moment. And we're talking in a week where Wandering Earth 2 has just come out internationally, and again, playing on slightly more screens in London, several West End screens, and they're all absolutely rammed. Wow. The Chinese community in London has been absolutely packing out these screenings, and it's a wonderful thing to watch these films with an audience who is laughing in the right places, which Western viewers can't. So, and Moon Man is an incredibly interesting film. It's a distillation of lots of things which are distinctive about Chinese SF as it's emerging on screen, which is very different from Chinese SF as it's taken over our lives in the last decade in print. So this is a comedy. It's kind of the comedy version of The Martian, only with a live audience. It's based on a Korean webcomic called Moon You, which ran from 2016 to 2019. And it's one of these films. I don't know if this is a Chinese thing generally, but it's one of these films which starts as though it's the sequel to an even more exciting film that you just kind of take as read. But it's about an Earth-threatening apocalyptic disaster. There's an asteroid impact, which is countered, or an impending asteroid impact, which is countered by the United Nations Moon Shield Project, whose aim is to use the moon as an anti-asteroid shield, mining helium-3 to create a weapon called the Cosmic Striking Hammer, which will break up this asteroid and cause it to fragment and only marginally destroy civilization. And that all happens in the prologue. It's kind of one of the levels on which this film is so extraordinary. It's like a parody of The Wandering Earth. But the actual plot is about the one rather low-level moon-based bureaucrat who's stranded on the moon because his attention is distracted while there is this emergency evacuation because there is one of these asteroid fragments heading for the moon base. And he thinks that the Earth has been destroyed by the asteroid fragments that made it through the shield, and he thinks he's the last human alive. What he doesn't know is that actually the project has been quite successful, and that he is being monitored and his every move surveilled by the surviving humans who made it into underground bunkers. And again, there's a lot of Wandering Earth motifs in all of this, particularly Wandering Earth 2, actually. And so they're all live streaming him to a global audience, and because they don't have audio, they dub on voiceover that tries to present him as a great civilizational hero, as a great kind of role model.
Oh, wow.
It's a very Chinese
amazing.
kind of thing. And gradually he deconstructs this image of the hero that is being engineered from him from the outside, and reveals that he is in fact a complete goof off. And then the plot gets going, as you'll have to just bear with me for the next bit. He discovers that he is cooped up in the moon base with a space kangaroo.
Wow.
I assume a relic of the webcomic, which I haven't seen. I mean, Kangaroo is a great webcomic fodder. And initially they are antagonists. They become best buddies. And it turns out that there is another civilizational destroying fragment heading for Earth, and he and his kangaroo buddy need to perform one last act of heroism, and again a very Chinese and again specifically Wandering Earth kind of thing, act of final self-sacrifice to save humanity after all. So that's the film.
And that's the film. Wow. That's a lot. Space kangaroos. That's wow. That's amazing.
Well, actually, it's an Earth kangaroo who has ended up on the moon. He's called King Kong Roo, and he's a very active and violent kangaroo who's obviously watched a little bit, slightly too many kangaroo boxing movies.
I kind of want to see it just for how a kangaroo behaves in moon gravity. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I can't say that that kangaroo moon gravity has been a big part of the science fictional thinking on this.
You mentioned that this is part of a new wave of kind of Chinese science fiction, which is, you know, coming to a Western audience, and yeah, how does this compare to some of the other films you've seen?
Well, this is a film which has had almost no exposure to Western audiences. It's not streamable, as far as I know, at least in the UK. It had a bit of coverage in press reviews, but it isn't, like a lot of Chinese releases, it's not really impinging on the Western film-going consciousness. It's not really on their radar. And I think it's a terrible mistake, because China, of course, is one of the places that is really shaping, well, it's the places that's shaping even how Western films are made. And the fact that Avatar, A Way of Water was released in China, and that they're now opening up again to Marvel films, which have been suppressed for the last couple of years for slightly mysterious reasons, is already starting to shape the business model in big studio productions. But also there is this growing confidence that the local market alone can actually support really ambitious, big budget filmmaking of a kind that doesn't have to compromise with Western sensibilities. And one of the fascinating things about Moon Man is that it's completely made out of a kind of trope that is not really part of at least the kind of Hollywood individualist sort of sensibility. Like the first Wandering Earth, it's very much about heroic engineering, about humanity banding together to in strangely unproblematic ways, and usually under Chinese leadership, to achieve global solutions involving vast, monumental technological achievements to protect the future of humanity collectively. And whereas the Wandering Earth films treat this for the most part seriously, despite the goofiness, particularly of the first one. There's much less of it in the sequel, which of course is actually a prequel. It's actually the backstory of the first film. Moon Man thumbs its nose at it, and particularly this narrative of trying to create a hero out of someone who, in fact, it's gradually revealed, only signed up to the lunar program because he had the hots for one of the mission commanders, who is vastly out of his league. But of course they do develop a remote romantic connection when she survives, and they become part of the main film plot. So it's got these collectivist kinds of models of heroism that elsewhere, of course, are seen as a kind of potential future solution to global issues of how we cope with civilizational threats, including climate change, and how you can shape a response by unifying international decision-making under a single authority. So the United Earth government of the Wandering Earth films is a great model for this kind of top-down leadership that can make these heroic engineering projects possible. But the glorious thing about Moon Man is that the attempt to create propaganda heroes from this kind of project is revealed as having feet of clay, and the hero is completely inadequate to be the propaganda icon that he's being promoted as, until he earns it himself through the kangaroo-related events of the film.
Okay. Well, that definitely sounds like one I will be looking for in all sorts of places. So yeah, thank you for that one. And super. Moving on to the next one. So the Deer King, which I know nothing about. I haven't seen anything about this one at all. So yeah, tell me all about the Deer King.
Well, the Deer King is one of these animes that has often in the UK got a rather limited theatrical release, but one of the plus signs about it, one of the positive things about it is that you tend to see the same people converging at these limited screenings. So this is something about which there was huge excitement in the anime community. This is the directorial debut of Masashi Ando, who is one of these figures who has been in the industry for decades and has worked on. I mean, he's a Ghibli product originally, going all the way back to I think only yesterday. Worked as an animator on so many legendary features, not just from Ghibli, but subsequently. I mean, he worked on Tokyo Godfathers, Ghost in the Shell, Paprika, Letter to Momo. When Marnie was there, Miss Hokusai, Napping Princess, Your Name, Mary and the Witch's Flower, Weathering with You. It's just a roll call of some of the greatest films ever to have come out of Japan. And finally, he gets to direct a feature. It's based on... so this is a kind of... if you could imagine post-apocalyptic high fantasy, it's
okay.
So you have to imagine a fantasy universe in which there has been a bio-apocalypse. It's based on a short novel series by Naoko Uehashi, which hasn't been translated into I think any Western languages. So I've only got the film to go on, but it resonates particularly strongly with the moment because in this fantasy kingdom there is a kind of pandemic event, something called the Mitsuwa or black mold fever that has been that has kind of scarred the history of the world. And the film itself, which seems, as far as I can gather, to follow the novels, or at least the first novel, quite closely, is our first pandemic high fantasy with your rather uncompromisingly novelistic high fantasy plot with a fellowship and a quest played out against a background of political intrigue. And it's one of these films that's very driven by world building and by the concepts in play rather than actual stakes and action and propulsive forward movement. But it's a really fascinating intrusion of the world of face masks and syringes and antibodies into the world of high fantasy. I think the reaction to it has been that it doesn't really carry you as a narrative. It's so novelistic. It's so... I mean, the dialogue is often rather leaden as well. But it's such a fascinating fusion. I mean, the idea of trying to marry high fantasy tropes to the formative experience, the formative, as it were, science fictional experience of our generation is actually really spellbinding to watch, and I absolutely love the film, despite the fact that it doesn't. By the end of it, you think I'm not sure I really understand what really happened there. And the plot always kind of leaves you one step behind. One of the great things about it, one of the things I heartily approve, is that it's one of these films which leads up to what you think is going to be a big third act battle as warfare breaks out between the two rival kingdoms. And the whole point of the film is that doesn't happen and that it's averted. And that seems to me a beautifully non-Western kind of ending.
Oh, that sounds. I mean, that definitely catches my eye. I like the idea of this post-apocalyptic high fantasy. That sounds really cool. Sounds really cool. Digressing slightly to, because you're in the UK, and there is this theatrical production of My Neighbor Totoro. I don't know if it's on now or if it's coming in the summer.
It's just coming to an end. We couldn't get tickets, or at least my daughter was trying to get tickets. I mean, it sold out very, very rapidly. We were going to get tickets for Christmas, and haven't been yet. But yes, I mean, it's. I'm not entre nous. I'm not entirely sure what the point is of doing My Neighbor Totoro on stage, because the entire point of everything that's brilliant about that film is to do with its use of the animation medium. But it's such an extraordinary story that sweeps you up, and as someone who's watched the sequel, of course, which they only show in the Ghibli Museum, it has a special place in my heart. But no, I haven't seen it.
Sorry, there's a sequel?
Yeah, there's a sequel called May and the Kitten Bus, which is one of those Ghibli Museum shorts that is, but it's absolutely beautiful, and I think they do sell a quite full kind of picture book version in the museum, and which I think you can probably buy online. It is actually essential Miyazaki. Do you want to do the little sidebar on May and the Kitten Bus? I could talk about it all day long.
Let's save that. Because I will make a mental note, because I do love that film, and my kids have all watched it a lot, but my youngest was going through a point, I think it was about 6 months ago, where she was watching it so much I was becoming dizzy with it. It was sort of it's just an amazing film, just so
I don't think you can watch it too much.
I don't think so.
I raised two daughters on it.
You raised two daughters on it. No, I don't think you can. I think that it's sort of I think there's something about the beats in it that you can kind of almost come into it at any point, which is what was happening which is why I was laughing earlier, because I wasn't really watching the whole film all the way through. I was kind of like, there was skipping forward and skipping back and watching this bit and all of that. But it kind of still works. It's one of those films where you can kind of just get dropped in and, okay, let's just go and just watch it again.
I have that relationship to Con Air. Yeah.
Oh, really?
For some reason, it's always on TV in the UK.
Oh, is it? That's interesting.
Yeah, and I can never turn it off when it comes on. You just kind of get swept up in wherever you are and think, oh my God, this bit's coming up. I've got to watch it as far as that, the bit where he says, is that your car? And... you can drop into.
And are you a Nicolas Cage fan in general? Because I am. I think he's genius. And but I know some people. He's kind of like Marmite, right? He's now kind of transcended all other genres of film acting, and a Nicolas Cage vehicle that lets him go full Nicolas Cage is absolutely. Kind of glues your eyeballs to the screen. But some of them are truly terrible films, and you just got to kind of balance the two of those. Yeah. Okay, and moving from there, and of course Nicolas Cage is in Wild at Heart, and that kind of links us nicely to Lynch Oz, which you're going to talk about next, I think.
Yes, well, this is a rare example of a theatrically released documentary, which talks in really central ways about traditions of fantastic filmmaking. This is the, I think, 10th feature now by the great film documentarist Alexandre Philippe, who may not be all that recognised in name, but he's probably best known to INTERZONE readers for his film Memory, The Origins of Alien, but he also did one about George Lucas's relationship to The People versus George Lucas, which is about his relationship to his fan base and the adversarial relationship there. He's done features about he's done an entire feature about the shower scene in Psycho. And he's a tremendously experienced maker of films about films with a great team that he's been using for years. And this is the film where he turns his attention to one of his great obsessions, which is David Lynch's own obsession with The Wizard of Oz. And the way this film's put together is like no other documentary you've ever seen. It's assembled in 6 chapters, each of which is led by a critic or filmmaker, some of them of great interest to INTERZONE readers. So the last 2 segments are by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, the great NDSF stars that we're all big fans of, and David Lowery, the great filmmaker behind Pete's Dragon, the one Disney live-action remake that absolutely stomps on the original, A Ghost Story, and of course The Green Knight is astonishing medieval fantasy. And each of these contributors deals with, in each of these segments, they talk about one particular aspect of Lynch's, as the film shows, absolutely all-consuming obsession with The Wizard of Oz, but also in broader terms about the impact of The Wizard of Oz on all subsequent filmmaking, particularly in the fantastic genres. So you go into the film thinking, well, I've noticed that Wild at Heart is a bit obsessed with red shoes, and actually there are quite a lot of red shoes elsewhere in Lynch if you see them all edited together, and there are an awful lot of curtains in David Lynch films, but how are they going to make a 2-hour feature out of red shoes and curtains? And gradually over the course of the 6 segments, which have been very cleverly kind of co-devised between Philippe as the overall director and the particular interests and sometimes the particular bodies of filmmaking from the contributors, you get a sense not just of the seemingly rather limited subject of how this film, in which obviously Lynch himself has come completely clean about his lifelong fixation with, but also actually the much wider traditions of fantastic filmmaking that have fed the work of people like Lowery and Benson Moorhead. Karen Kusama is in there as well. And it becomes actually a kind of test of the thesis, which is not a new one, but is variously attributed in the film, that actually all films subsequent to The Wizard of Oz are basically The Wizard of Oz. And at the same time, it doubles as a way of getting Lynch to talk about Lynch without actually requiring him to break his notorious silence on what his films mean. And all of this is done within a grammar of filmmaking documentary and an incredible mastery of the legalities of fair use to edit together clips that you wouldn't be able to get paid permission to use from some of the greatest films of the last 100 years. In a kind of almost Adam Curtis-like mastery of telling stories through juxtaposition and obsession with the grammar of likeness between seemingly unrelated images. And it's a wonderful film about Lynch.
No, but the in terms of those like the way they edit things together, there's one in particular where you kind of see the attention to detail. Where I think it's the scene from The Wizard of Oz where they're kind of looking over a ledge at something, at these sort of and then there are a couple of comparison shots, and the shot on the right sort of just very slowly moves down and back up just to kind of line it, just to be properly lined up with the one on the left, and it was this little kind of these little details, and the amount of care that's gone into these sort of juxtapositions is astonishing. It's a
Yes, we should explain that it uses a lot of split screen. So you're seeing a shot from one film alongside a shot from another. There's an amazing montage in the Lowry sequence, which is the great climactic finale. Although I don't think actually it's authored by Lowry, this particular bit, which simply shows, I mean, it's testing out the thesis that, for example, Hitchcock's Birds is a film he was building towards throughout his life. And it just picks up a bunch of and it does a bunch of shots involving birds from earlier Hitchcock films, where you can see some of the visual language of the birds and some of the effect of those shots being tried out the first time, without, of course, any sense of when these earlier films were made, that this was where it was ultimately going. And then there's a montage which does this the same kind of thing for Kiarostami and Antonioni, and it's showing that directorial careers are sometimes don't follow the arrow of time the way you would expect, that they're actually they lead toward summative moments, and that's really the only way to explain them. And all this is done through this language of comparing shots from often seemingly very unrelated films, either side by side or in sequential montage. And it shows a kind of mastery of how you make films about film that I don't really remember seeing anywhere else.
Right. I can't think of anything which has done it as well as this, and while also being really sort of making you want to go back to the source material. There was an Arthur Penn film that I'd never, maybe I'd seen like tiny bits from, but yeah, the Miracle Worker.
The Miracle Worker.
Yeah, the Miracle Worker, which sort of, I think that's in the Justin Benson sequence, in the Justin Benson Aaron Moorhead sequence, where they're talking about, I think that's the sequence. And yeah, it just kind of made me kind of really, it does sort of open this door on the material. And I listened to the very beginning of the commentary where Kim Newman is talking to the director. And I think the director says quite early on that sort of, it's not a definitive answer. It's like a doorway into the material, or it's like a way of opening up the material. And I think that's what worked for me, was just this, okay, wow, I need to go and watch these things with a completely different, way of seeing things, basically.
Yes, and it works particularly well for Lynch because he is so notoriously reticent about what is even going on in some of his films, even though a lot of the time, I mean, in Inland Empire or in Mulholland Drive, I think it is now fairly well established that there is something very specific going on. These are narratives which are summarizable in ways that Lynch himself, of course, absolutely refuses to do. And one of the things that this film does is to introduce you to a way of understanding Lynchian narrative that doesn't require you to spend the next 36 hours of your life on Reddit trying to collate attempts to summarize 3 hours of Inland Empire, which remains a completely baffling film, but nevertheless actually does have a kind of controlling narrative behind it. And this is a film that, quite apart from making you want to go back and watch the source material, as you were just saying, also sends you back to Lynch and sends you back to some of these astonishing moments, some of which crop up repeatedly in different segments that give you the opportunity to watch those films again with a new kind of eye.
And the segments, the segments are not, or the segments for me were not equally satisfying. I think
I agree.
I think the first one kind of worked. I think Amy Nicholson's worked as a sort of runway into what was going on, and that kind of made sense. And then the jump, it's Rodney Archer was the second one, and John Waters was kind of really funny because it became about John Waters a lot. Which was also good, but the one that really the two that stood out were the fourth and fifth. So the Karen Kusama, I found that one really interesting, and then the one after that, the Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead one. Those two for me kind of like tapped into, for very different reasons, something that I was maybe kind of starting to feel. But there's like a phrase that is it Justin speaking or is it Aaron? I'm not sure.
It sounds like Aaron, actually.
It sounds like Aaron.
But I think they do switch over. I mean, you don't think of them as having similar voices. I would think of Moorheads as being slightly higher in pitch, and they've got quite different intonations, but they are starting to merge into a single voice.
I wasn't sure. I didn't think about that until later. But I think it was in whichever segment it was. There was a phrase: the membranes of reality getting thinner. And this sort of and that kind of that little point sort of started to pull the whole thing together, because I thought, oh, okay, so it kind of the thesis tightened up in my mind, at least. Then it's like, right, so that's what's going on here. These sort of membranes thinning is a great way of putting it.
Yes, and as I think you mentioned in passing, the if you get the DVD, which I warmly recommend, you get this interview with, I think it actually is a real commentary, although most of the time they're not talking about this on screen, with Kim Newman, who is the absolute perfect person to be interviewing Philippe. And one of the things they say is that actually also gives you this unexpected insight into some of these great filmmakers' own relationship with the film and what they're seeing, with The Wizard of Oz, and what they're seeing when they watch Lynch's take on it. And I completely agree about the Benson Moorhead sequence. I also think the David Lowery sequence, the final one, is particularly fascinating as a window into Lowery's own filmmaking. Yes. He talks, amongst other things, about his use of the Spielberg face, quite self-consciously in Pete's Dragon especially, as one of these kind of modern mechanisms of film affect that it has that traces a line back to The Wizard of Oz. But it is, I feel, even if you don't have the slightest interest in Lynch, it's a great film about The Wizard of Oz and its impact. And it's also a great film about John Waters and Karen Kusama and Benson and Moorhead and David Lowery.
Mm-hmm. No, it definitely, because it also kind of sheds light on all sorts of things. That Lowery sequence, at one point I wasn't sure, and then it was that Spielberg reference that kind of I thought, oh, that is so interesting. And he sort of was talking about giving a direction to the actors, like, look at the sky and look amazed. And they're like, amazed about what? It doesn't matter, we'll sort it out later, or something like
this.
Yes,
what am I looking at?
Yeah, what am I looking at?
Yeah, and of course, there are YouTube montages about the Spielberg face is not news. It's one of arguably one of the greatest inventions in the grammar of science fiction cinema in the last 50 years, and it's everywhere now. But having a filmmaker who is making that kind of film talk about it is actually a really interesting angle on it.
Yeah, it's and I wondered if, because it was right at the very beginning. I think it was definitely in the right at the very beginning. Amy Nicholson talks about how there's a direction that Lynch would give, and it's like, more wind. And for me, that kind of insight into sort of what the directors are saying to the actors was really interesting. So I thought with the Lowry one, it was interesting to kind of come around and go, okay, I kind of wish I'd heard more about what other people were doing. There was a bit of it in the John Waters, and then they all were doing different things, which worked, I think. But those of us who are Benson and Moorhead fans would love to hear more about Benson and Moorhead. Yeah, that was the one.
Their segment. They were the ones who weren't really talking about their own.
No, not at all. They were the ones with the most, I thought, kind of like sort of well structured. Like the essay that was in that segment made a lot of sense, I think. It kind of went in, and it sort of, for me at least, it seemed like they were really concentrating on this particular line of argument, and to get Apocalypse Now in, and to then have those sort of to have those archive clips, I thought was I'd never in 1,000 years have gone Wizard of Oz, Apocalypse Now, but they sold it.
The arc of the film overall is to focus increasingly on the darker side of Oz, and those last two. I mean, the Benson Moorhead one is about. It's called Judy, and it's loosely linked together by the. Just explain this, obviously, for the listeners, not for you, because you've just watched it. But it's about how knowing about Judy Garland and her subsequent career can't stop you viewing the film in a particular kind of way, and then Larry kind of builds on that in his own way to focus on the deeper darknesses in it. I think in a slightly less kind of joined up way, but in a way that makes a very powerful film to the end to the film as a whole. And one of the things they discuss in the commentary is how Philippe worked with all the contributors to co-devise these segments. So he got them all he recorded interviews with them, first of all, about what they their take on The Wizard of Oz and Lynch and the relationship between them was, and then he they back and forthed a script which he edited the images to, and they then recorded. And I don't know if anyone else has done that kind of way of making documentaries, and it does show a kind of depth of experience in how filmmakers think and how you talk to filmmakers and how you kind of capture their ideas. But it does when you watch it again, I watched it again this week, and you do notice that actually sometimes the arguments are joined up through the clips that he's connected them with, rather than anything in the actual script. And I think the Lowry one is one of those which is kind of all over the place, but is given coherence through the absolutely dazzling use of montage.
Yeah. It's definitely worth. Yeah, I do. I recommend it, and I as soon as I finished watching it, I also wanted to watch the documentary again, because I realized, as you were sort of hinting at there were these connections, and also I thought, I mean, how did they choreograph this? I mean, was this all edited on afterwards, or were people kind of going back and forth and choosing clips? I mean, there's the whole kind of organizational side of getting these conversations, and then not having them be too repetitive, and also, as you say, build towards this sort of darker angle, but also this I forget who says it. I think it might be Karen Kusama, but this idea of Lynch being, finding the hope inside and finding the sort of the kind of the better sides of people.
Yes, and it sends you back to Lynch, thinking, okay, this is actually a major Lynchian theme that we've always kind of been aware of, but we haven't really had if you like, a label to put on it, or a sense of where it's coming from.
Right. Well, that was great. That was really interesting. Thank you for that. So we're going to wrap up. You're going to give a little bit of a hint or a preview of what's coming in your Mutant Popcorn for INTERZONE 295. Go for it.
Yes, well, it's going to be, of course, this is going to be one of those issues that captures the beginning of the blockbuster season. So, although nobody's seen them yet, we're going to have the first Marvel film of the year, Quantumania. We're going to have this will be the one that catches the delayed European release of Puss in Boots. We're going to get Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin, which looks so it's going to be interesting on a number of levels. We've got the Shazam sequel. We've also got some stuff I've already seen. Wandering Earth 2 is clearly, this is the film that, of course, has displaced Avatar from the top of the charts in China, has been, on the whole, received better than the first film, although I think I still prefer the first one, but it's certainly a slicker production. We've got Megan, which has caught the wave of AI conversations in ways it could never have anticipated at the time it was being made. We've got Shin Ultraman, which is the follow-up to Shin Godzilla, reviving a classic property for a 21st century, basically home Japanese audience. We've got the absolutely astonishing looking Distant, which is
is this the one? Is this the sci-fi comedy?
This is
one?
the asteroid. Well, I don't really know what it's going to be like, but this is going to be the plot summary is about an asteroid miner who has to survive on an alien planet on which he's crashed, and the even more astonishing 65, which is the Beck Woods production. They, of course, with A Quiet Place breakout filmmakers. This is the much discussed trailer with another astronaut crashed on, this is the Adam Driver one, crashed on a mysterious planet, only to find that there are nasty things waiting for him. So it's going to be quite a busy issue, and there will probably be more stuff that has materialized by the time we hit press time.
Looking forward to it. I'm particularly looking forward to you mentioned this sort of the kind of AI angle that you had to kind of cut from the last one. So that's going to be interesting for sure.
Yes, I mean, to explain the backstory to this, we were already starting to get a wave of AI films at the end of 2022, which were kind of disguised as Pinocchio films. So after Yang, I think, which is a terrific film, is kind of an AI Pinocchio film. And Megan, I think, is kind of taking this nascent genre in the first hour of it is taking it in a rather new direction, and then it becomes a kind of stock Blumhouse film in the second half. But anyway, all this will be coming through your letterbox or in your ebook in the spring.
Yeah, very soon. Thank you very much for all of that. You can find INTERZONE at interzone.press and that's where you can go for subscriptions, extensions, resubscriptions, all those things are all there. And Scarlet Ferret, and also I should mention Weightless Books if you're in America or anywhere apart from Europe and the UK, I think. I think that's where they have problems sending to. So yeah, Weightless and Scarlet Ferret for ebooks, and interzone.press for the print edition. Thank you so much, Nick Lowe. Thank you for coming on, and I look forward to the next chat.
Well, thanks so much. It's been great.